Montana Territory. August 1878, the wedding dress itched like fire against her skin as Elira Vance kicked open the back door of the parlor house and ran barefoot, breathless, and terrified into the thick woods behind the estate. The veil tangled in a pine branch, tearing free as she bolted down the slope, dress tearing at the hem. She did not stop to look back. She did not dare. The man she had been forced to wed, Land Baron Silas Meacham, was not the sort to forgive disobedience, and he had paid handsomely for her. Elira's lungs burned, but she kept running. She had no plan beyond the trees, only the knowledge that she would rather die lost in the wild than spend another hour under that man's roof. She stumbled down a ravine, scraped her palms on stone, and pushed on, deeper into the wilderness. Thunder rumbled somewhere far off. The sky was bruising gray and night would fall soon. She had nothing, no food, no shoes, no coat, but she was free. That mattered more than anything. As the wind picked up and the first drops of rain came spitting through the trees, she collapsed against a fallen log, pulling her knees into her torn dress and trying not to sob out loud. A twig snapped. She stilled, hand reaching for a rock, heart hammering. Another step. Then a voice, low, calm, steady. "You do not belong out here." Elira turned her head fast. A man stood a few yards off, half in shadow. He wore a faded cavalry jacket, stripped of insignia, his rifle slung across one shoulder. His face was lean, sun-worn, and serious. His black hair was tied back and his boots were soaked from the muddy trail. He looked like part of the wilderness itself. Elira backed up a step, her voice shaking. "Please, I do not want any trouble." "I believe that," he said, watching her carefully. "You are shaking like a leaf and dressed like a bride thrown from a carriage." "I was not thrown," she whispered. "I ran." The man stepped closer slowly. "You are not from around here." "My father arranged a marriage." Her voice cracked. "To a man with a lot of land and too many men with guns. He hurt you." "He would have," she said. "He bought me like a mule and I said no, he did not like that." The scout nodded once. "I know that kind of man." She looked up at him. "Are you going to make me go back?" "No," he said simply. "But you cannot stay here. These woods are rough. There are mountain cats, worse things. Come on." "Where?" "My shelter. It is not far." She hesitated, then followed. She had no other choice, and something about the way he moved, cautious but certain, made her believe he meant no harm. They walked in silence. The drizzle turned to full rain before they reached his shelter, a lean-to tucked beneath a jutting rock face, hidden by brush and trees. There was already a small fire smoking just inside. He handed her a blanket and turned his back as she huddled beside the fire, shivering. She glanced at him. "What is your name?" "Silven Oakes." "Elira Vance." He gave a small nod, then crouched to stir the fire. "You are lucky I found you. This storm will last all night." "I am not lucky," she said, voice raw. "I was almost married to a man who would have caged me." He looked over, eyes steady. "You are not caged now." She studied him in the flickering light. "Why are you out here?" "I scout for wagon trains, sometimes the army," he said. "Lately I keep to the woods, less noise. Fewer lies." She leaned closer to the fire. "You live alone?" "I like quiet." Her voice softened. Even now, he did not answer right away. Then, quiet does not mean lonely. They ate dried meat and shared the last of his coffee. Night settled heavy and wet outside. Elira tucked the blanket close. "I will leave in the morning," she said. "Where will you go?" "I do not know." "Away." "Meacham has men," Silven said. "He will send them out. You will not get far." She looked away, jaw tight. "I cannot go back." "You will not," he said without hesitation. She looked up, meeting his eyes. For the first time since she ran, she felt something like safety. He pulled off his coat and set it beside her. "Sleep. We will figure the rest in the morning." Elira curled into the blanket, the coat over her, the fire warming her back. Rain thrummed on the rock above, and for the first time in days her breathing slowed. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she was not alone. By morning the rain had slowed to a mist. Pale light seeped through the trees, casting the forest in shades of wet gray and green. Elira sat hunched near the fire's remains, Silven's coat still drawn tight around her as the woods stirred to life. Silven was crouched a few paces away, stripping bark from a downed birch. His movements were quiet, practiced. She watched his hands, how they worked without hesitation. "You were awake before the sun," she said. He didn't look up. "There's a trail a few miles east. If we follow it, I'll know whether anyone's been through since yesterday. I should keep moving. I can't stay here and wait for them to find me. You'll slow down quick without food or rest." "I don't have time for rest." "You don't have a choice," he said, standing. "They'll be riding, but they won't expect you to stay close. That's the only advantage you've got." She rose, brushing ash from her skirt. "If I head south, I could reach Fort Benton. My father has no ties there." "You could," Silven said, pulling a worn canvas pack from beneath the rock ledge. "But that's a long walk through country you don't know, with men tracking you. I can't ask you to help me. You didn't." He handed her a strip of smoked venison and a small tin of dried berries. "Eat. Then we move." As they walked, she noticed how he chose his steps, avoiding open spaces, keeping low near the ridgelines. He never spoke unless necessary. When he did, it was with the same economy he used in every movement. They crossed a shallow creek, her skirts dragging in the cold water. She slipped once on a slick rock, catching herself before falling. Silven turned back, offering a hand without a word. She took it, her fingers stiff from the chill. "Where did you learn all this?" she asked once they crested the ridge and paused beneath a pine. "From men who didn't write books," he said, "and from watching what lives and what doesn't. Were you ever in the army for a time?" he said. "Didn't make sense to stay." She studied the worn seams of his jacket. "Why not?" Orders started asking for things I couldn't live with. She didn't press. The wind had picked up, stirring damp leaves around their boots. She pulled the coat tighter. "There's a cabin another half-day east," he said. "Old trapper's place, he's gone, roof still holds. We'll make for that." They walked until her legs burned and the damp turned to heat beneath her clothes. When the cabin came into view, a slope-shouldered thing with a mossy roof and one shutter hanging crooked, she nearly wept. Inside, it smelled of cedar and dust. There were 2 cots, a rusted stove, and a few tools on the wall. Silven lit a fresh fire while she peeled off the soaked outer layers of her dress and hung them near the hearth. She sat on the edge of the cot, wrapping a wool blanket around her knees. "What happens if they find this place?" "They won't," he said, kneeling to stir the fire. "I left signs to lead them west." She looked at him. "You've done this before," he met her eyes. "Not like this." She folded her hands in her lap. "You don't owe me anything." "No," he said. "But I'm not the kind of man who lets harm come when he can stop it." Silence stretched. Then she said, "I don't even know what I'm supposed to do now. I can't go back. I can't write to anyone. My name's tied to his now, and that's all anyone will see." "Names don't mean much out here," he said. "How you live does." She watched the firelight flicker on the cabin walls. "I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to run." He sat across from her, resting his elbows on his knees. "You didn't run, you chose yourself. That takes grit," she exhaled, slow. "I'm not sure I have any left." "You do." Hours passed in quiet. She helped clean the stove, found a dented kettle to boil water, and folded a piece of burlap to patch a broken window pane. He showed her how to tie a snare, how to check the wind before stepping outside. That night, as the fire burned low and the wind scraped gently against the walls, she lay awake on the cot. Silven was across the room, his rifle within reach, his breathing even. She turned her face to the rafters, the blanket pulled to her chin. For the first time, she wondered what it would mean to stay. Not just here, in this cabin, but near the man who had given her shelter without demand, who moved through the world like it owed him nothing and still offered what he could. She closed her eyes and let the thought settle, quiet and warm and terrifying. Dawn came slow, filtered through low-hanging mist and the warped window glass. Elira stepped outside into the hush of the woods, the blanket drawn around her shoulders, the hem brushing the moss-soft ground. Her bare feet sank into the earth with each step, cold but steady. Behind her, the cabin was quiet, smoke rising in a lazy thread from the chimney. Silven was already gone from his cot. She followed the faint trail he'd left broken ferns, a heel print near a crooked root until she saw him by the creek, crouched with a fishing line wound around a willow branch. He looked up once, then went back to his work. "I didn't hear you leave," she said. "You were sleeping deep." "That's good. I didn't think I would." He pulled the line from the water, empty. He rewound it with practiced fingers. "They'll ride harder today if they've picked up the trail." She lowered herself onto a flat stone and tucked her feet beneath her. "You always plan ahead, don't you? Only when it matters." She watched the current slide around stones and driftwood. "You said you left the army. Did you leave anything else behind?" He didn't answer right away. "Then a brother, younger. We don't talk." "Why?" He stayed in Missouri. "Took to rail work. Thought I was wasting myself in the woods." "Do you think he was right?" "I think we both ended up alone." A trout flashed silver beneath the water. Silven cast again, silent. Elira sat with her hands laced over her knees. "I was supposed to play piano in St. Louis." "That was the plan. My aunt was arranging everything, and then father changed his mind." "What made him turn?" "He said it wasn't proper, that I was too bold with my opinions, that music wouldn't buy security." Silven looked at her. "He sold you instead." Her voice dropped, small and bitter. "He called it a match." They walked back to the cabin with 2 fish wrapped in damp cloth. She cleaned them while Silven stoked the fire back to life. The pan hissed when he laid the fillets in. She turned away from the smell. Her stomach felt tight. "Do they know this cabin?" she asked. "Not likely. It's not on any maps. But if they find it." He turned the fish without looking at her. "We won't be here long. You've already done too much. You've got no place else yet. That's enough reason." She stared at the flame licking the pan's edge. "You don't ask for anything." "I've had enough of people who take without asking." After they ate, she swept the floor and folded what blankets they had. He packed with purpose, setting aside half their supplies and tucking them into a canvas roll. "Where are we going?" she asked. "There's a Mennonite family 2 ridges east. They keep to themselves, but they owe me a favor." She stood by the doorway, arms crossed. "You trust them. They won't speak your name to anyone." She watched him cinch the pack. "When we get there, will you leave?" "I'll stay as long as you want me to." She turned her face toward the trees. "I don't know what I want." "That's fair." They traveled by switchback trails, avoiding the main ridge. The sun came out for a stretch, dappling the forest floor with pale gold. Elira walked in silence, her steps surer now, the coat she wore belted tight. By mid-afternoon, a clearing opened before them, a sloping pasture with a low barn and a sod-roofed house tucked against the tree line. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a child's laughter drifted faintly through the air. They stopped at the edge of the trees. "You sure?" she asked. He nodded once. "They'll feed you, give you rest, then we figure the next step. I'm not ready to be looked at. They'll see a traveler, nothing more." She stepped forward, then paused. "If I asked you to stay, would you?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes," she turned, her voice quiet. "And if I asked you not to?" "I'd walk, no questions." She studied him. "You're not like anyone I've known." "That's the point, Elira." For a long moment neither moved. Wind stirred the tall grass. She reached for his hand, her fingers brushing his calloused palm. "I want to see what it's like," she said, voice steady. "To choose a man who listens before he speaks." He stepped closer, their hands joined, the distance between them gone now. "You just did." The sun warmed her back as she walked with him toward the house, her steps no longer fleeing but moving forward. They stayed 2 nights with the Roth family. The cabin was narrow and clean, built from hand-hewn logs and smelling of beeswax and rye bread. The man of the house, Jakob, spoke little, but his wife, Anneliese, had kind eyes and made room without asking questions. They offered Elira dry clothes and warm broth and didn't press when she hesitated before giving her name. Silven slept in the barn loft, his bedroll laid between sacks of oats and coils of rope. In the evenings, Jakob and Silven mended fence posts by lamplight while Elira helped Anneliese bake loaves for the Sunday table. It was the first time since leaving the parlor house she'd used her hands for something that didn't cost her. On the third morning, Silven met her at the stream behind the barn. Mist clung low to the water, and the reeds were stiff with frost along their tips. He held a folded map in one hand and motioned her to sit on the flat stone beside him. "There's a wagon route from here that cuts southeast," he said, spreading the map across his knee. "It's not traveled heavy this time of year, but there's a mill town 3 days in. You could find work, maybe a place to stay." She looked at the wide sweep of land sketched in charcoal and grease pencil. "And what would I say when they ask why I'm alone? You could say you're a widow. Or that you're waiting for family. I've never lied like that. You've never had to." She touched the edge of the map. "I can't live looking over my shoulder." "You won't have to," he said, folding the paper again. "Meacham's pride is louder than his reach. The longer you stay unseen, the faster he'll quiet down." She shook her head. "He doesn't forget slights. He forgets what doesn't serve him. You're only valuable to him if you return." She stood, pulling her shawl tight. "And if I don't want to vanish into some mill town?" "You don't have to," he said, standing with her. "There's a place I know near the Judith River. Old homestead, nothing fancy, but it's dry and there's space to grow if you're willing. You'd take me there. I'd take you wherever you wanted to go." She watched the water ripple over the stones. "Why offer that? Because I've seen what you are when no one's pressing you down. And I'd like to see more of it." Later that day, Annalise handed Elira a small parcel of cloth-wrapped bread and dried apples. "You'll need proper boots before winter," she said gently. "There's a cobbler in Lewistown if you pass through." Her accent softened the edges of her words, but her meaning was clear. "Prepare for what lies ahead." Elira nodded, tying the parcel to the side of her satchel. "Thank you for not asking things I couldn't answer." Annalise touched her arm. "We've all had to start over once." They left before the sun dipped, walking west beneath a sky streaked lavender and gold. The path wound through tall grass and dry creeks, and they stopped only once to drink from a spring that ran cold and sweet from a limestone cut. That night they camped under cottonwoods, the fire small and close between them. Silven unrolled a second blanket and passed it to her without speaking. She draped it across her knees, watching the embers drift up like fireflies. "I never thought I'd feel calm again," she said, her voice low. "I thought it would always be fear." "It doesn't have to be," he said. She studied his face, the firelight catching the plane of his cheek, the strong bridge of his nose. "When did you stop expecting the worst?" "I haven't," he said. "But I don't let it decide everything anymore." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and cooled earth. She glanced down at her hands, then back at him. "Do you think two people can build something lasting out of nothing but scraps?" He looked at her without blinking. "I think it's the only way anything real ever gets built." She leaned her weight slightly toward him, not touching, not yet, but near enough that their shared warmth lingered between them. "Then maybe I'd like to try." He didn't answer, but his gaze held steady and something unspoken passed between them. Not a promise, not yet, but the beginning of one. The fire crackled softly and the night settled around them. They reached the old homestead 2 days later, beneath a sky the color of burnished copper. The land sloped gently northward, a patch of prairie grass flanked by cottonwoods and narrow pines. The house stood weathered but upright cedar logs darkened by time, roof sagging at the corners, stone chimney still intact. A rusted plow leaned against the side wall, and a split-rail fence ran half-finished into the scrub. Silven stepped through the low gate first, testing the porch boards with his boot. It held through last winter, should hold another. Elira stood at the edge of the yard, fingers curled around the strap of her satchel. The air smelled of sun, warmed dirt, and sage. She stepped forward slowly, taking it in the chipped windows, the moss between the stones, the quiet. "How long since anyone lived here?" she asked. 5 years, maybe 6. Belonged to a man who trapped along the Judith. He married late and moved closer to town when his wife took ill. She reached for the latch on the door. It stuck, then gave with a groan. Inside, the air was thick with dust and old wood. A table stood in the center, one leg braced with a stone, two chairs, a dry sink. A cast iron stove with soot still in the pipe. "I can clean this," she said, brushing cobwebs from the mantel. "We'll need a bucket, a spade, maybe a new hinge for that back door." Silven leaned against the frame, watching her. "You thinking of staying, if you'll stay too?" He stepped inside, the floor creaking under his weight. "I was hoping you'd ask." By nightfall, they had swept the floors and aired out the bedding left in the small side room. Elira sat on the porch, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair damp from washing. Silven handed her a tin cup of warm water and sat on the steps beside her. "Jakob sent word through a trader," he said. "Mecham's men rode as far as the Milk River and turned back. Word is he said nothing of you in weeks." Elira stared into the dusk. "He'll move on. His kind always do when there's no one to control. You don't have to be afraid anymore." "I'm not," she said. "Not of him?" They sat in quiet until the stars came out, scattered across the sky like spilled salt. A meadowlark called once from the field beyond the fence, then went silent. "I used to think I'd marry someone with clean boots and a bank account," she said, her voice soft. "Someone who drank tea with my father and made polite talk about crops." Silven rested his elbow on his knee. "You regret not having that," she shook her head. "I'd have choked on it." He turned to her, his voice low. "You want this instead. A roof that leaks and a man who can't make small talk to save his skin? I want the man who never asked me to be smaller than I am." Silven reached for her hand, rough fingers curling around hers. "Then you've got him." She leaned into him, her head against his shoulder. He didn't move, just let her settle. The wind tugged at the edge of her shawl and she let it fall. "I never learned how to plant," she said after a while, "or mend a roof. I'm not sure I'd even know how to keep a chicken alive." "I'll teach you what I know," he said. "And we'll figure out the rest." She looked up at him, her eyes steady. "And if I burn the bread?" "Then we eat it anyway." They laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that comes only when fear has loosened its grip. That winter, they patched the roof with cedar shakes cut from the grove beyond the ridge. Elira learned to start a fire with one match and a twist of birch bark. Silven dug a pit for root storage, and she lined the shelves with calico left behind in the attic. When the first snow came, they were ready, more ready than either thought they'd be. He built her a bench near the stove where she practiced the chords she remembered from childhood on a salvaged dulcimer. She knit a scarf with uneven edges and called it good enough for warmth. They shared stories in pieces, slow and careful, like passing a jug between them. She told him of the riverboats she used to watch from her window in St. Louis. He told her about a crow that followed him for 3 weeks once, stealing jerky when he wasn't looking. By spring, the fence stood whole, and the first shoots of corn pushed through the soft earth. One morning, as the sun spilled over the edge of the hills and caught the dew on the grass, Elira stepped out with Silven's coat draped over her shoulders and found him kneeling in the garden bed, hands in the soil. She watched him for a while, then crossed the yard and crouched beside him. "I want to build something real with you," she said. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked at her. "You already are." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small ring, a simple band carved from pine, smoothed with ash. "I made it for you." "It's not much." He turned it in his palm, then slid it onto his finger. "It's everything." They stood together, wind lifting the hair from her neck, birdsong rising from the trees, and there, in the quiet place they'd made their own, they stayed. Years passed and the fields grew rich. The house stood firm. They never put up a sign or told many souls what had happened before. It didn't matter. What mattered was the weight of a hand held in trust, the comfort of silence shared, the way love settled deep and lasting like roots in good earth.